Welcome back, folks. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and today we are going to be covering the linebacker Chris Paul Jr. So before we get into that, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Also, be sure to follow me on all social media at JK Bogan, including Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Kick. In addition to that, just want to remind you guys, if you haven't already, be sure to check out my interview with Cam Curl over on The Lounge, and also be sure to check me out on Kick. I'll be going over some film, doing hangouts, and playing some video games. We're doing it again, so if you want to go and follow, go ahead, kick.com/JKBogan. All right. We move on to the breaking down a linebacker. We're starting off with Chris Paul Jr. from Ole Miss. Okay, this is a player that spent 3 years at Arkansas, transferred to Ole Miss. He's listed at 6'1", 222 pounds. He's 22 years of age right now. He'll be 23 in November. And this is a guy that had 40 games played in his career over 4 seasons, 225 tackles, 27 TFLs, 9.5 sacks, an interception, and 5 pass breakups. So right away, you're getting a guy that isn't going to be as splashy in, say, the turnover game, but he's got a lot of really good tape, and I think he's going to go in either the second or the third round. And I'm going to explain exactly why I think he makes a lot of sense for the Rams. But let's start off with the pros. This is a guy that's highly intelligent. He went on the Bootleg Football podcast. Highly recommend it, by the way. That interview will be linked below. But he went on the Bootleg Football podcast and, absolutely blew me away with his knowledge of the game. And to me, that knowledge shows up on tape. The testing might not show it, but, he plays on tape like he's an elite athlete. And I don't think the testing by any stretch means that he's not an elite athlete or he's not a good athlete, we'll say. But some people will look at, now linebackers run 4.4s. He ran in the 4.63 area. I mean, that's a really good time. Plus, I don't really care too much about the 40-yard dash. So there is that. But also, he's a very instinctive football player. It shows up on film. He works well with his overall football knowledge and his feel for the game. You can see it. He quite literally can do it all. Okay, this is a player that I've mentioned before, so it shouldn't be a shock. Very high on him. He's keen on stopping the run. He doesn't miss a tackle very often. But, he could also be used as a blitzer, and I think that's something that's going to add some serious value to him as he gets in the NFL. And, he can really show some stickiness in coverage as well, whether it's a running back or a tight end or even, by chance it's a wide receiver. And is that in man coverage, zone coverage, doesn't really matter. I think he could work in either or. He's very comfortable playing at his current weight. And I think the 2023 tape shows a guy that has really transformed his game. You look at 2023, he mentions it in the interview, and it's evident. At Arkansas, you can see a guy that was trying to knife his way through the trenches and make a play in the backfield. Now you see a guy that has found a way with better technique. He's not the strongest guy in the world, but with better technique, he's found his way to use his athleticism to just basically shove his way into the backfield, disengage from blocks, something that he wasn't doing the previous year. He was just trying to kind of skeet by, use his athleticism. And that's great and all, but it's also great when you have multiple ways to win. And that was something that I noticed immediately. So he's very comfortable with that. In traffic, he could shed blocks. He can get through. He's got great body positioning. So in the run game, you're kind of trying to mirror things. He stays, very disciplined in his gap assignments. He's dead set on not letting, pretty much anyone get by him. So that's a big thing. And, he just continues to get better and better. When you watch the film, you can see this is a player that is growing rapidly and he's really intelligent. And so when you have those things, you already have some good athleticism and you already have the ability to kind of do everything on a football field, you gain some serious confidence doing that. So that's something that, has really stood out to me, is that he just continues to get better and better. Those of you who love your linebackers to be sideline to sideline linebackers, this is, a guy that I would probably say you would enjoy watching, whether he's scrambling, he's going to stop a scrambling quarterback or cut off a running back turning a corner. It's evident this guy can really make it work. His ability to flip his hips and attack the football in the air, I think in coverage it stands out. Those drills, whether, backpedaling and moving the hips left and right. He's got some loose hips, and I think that allows him to kind of stay in a lot of those plays. He's not, stiff by any stretch, and I think that goes a long way. I think he's fine in any role you want to use him in, though. I think there's going to be, depending on where he lands, and I would like to see him land with somebody. Obviously, I'd like to see him land with the Rams. I'd like to see him land with somebody that's going to use him and maximize the things that he does. Just because he's really good in the run game doesn't mean he should only be used in the run game as a 2-down linebacker. Just because he's great in coverage doesn't mean he should only be used as a situational linebacker in coverage. Just because he's a really good blitzer doesn't mean he should only be used as a blitzer. Those are the things. And so I think that this is a guy that has kind of everything. He's not elite at anything. I think he's really good at a lot of different things. And I think that puts his ceiling pretty high, but I also think it puts a high floor. I think this is somebody that can come in and right away start for a football team. And I think that really bodes well for him, obviously. I think he's got some pop behind his pads. So when you're looking, his initial contact can really jar some blockers when he's ready and he's the one that's able to dish it out. And the versatility, like I said, you got that body that you see undersized, but I think he's got some room to add some mass and, kind of alleviate those play strength concerns. So a lot of good coming from a player in Chris Paul Jr., but what are the cons? Well, he is considered undersized, at his length. I think that really is one of those things like where I don't really care how tall you are. I don't really care how much weight you have. What do you play like? I've always heard, Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook, always said, size is not a skill. And I agree with that. I mean, we've seen guys that have made it in this league. I mean, Dexter Coakley is the first one that comes to mind, a 5'10", 5'9" linebacker that made it work for, the Dallas Cowboys, but also, worked with the Rams as well. And then, you've had guys since, like a Nick Bolton, right? So I'm not really too worried about height. This guy's 6'1". That'll do fine. The size, 222, 221, I mean, that's not really a big deal to me, because I think we've seen plenty of guys work at different sizes. I mean, you just had a guy that just got paid out the wazoo by the Jets, somebody that I really wanted, Jamien Sherwood, who was playing at 216. So I don't really care too much about that. I just want to see it on tape. Okay, you don't have the weight on, the ticker, right? You don't have the huge weight or whatever. You don't have the big height, but what do you play like? And I think that's really what it comes down to, and that's what matters. And so the thing here, though, is the length, because you look at the Saquon Barkley touchdown runs and you see just having that extra length can really help you out, can help a linebacker out, can help a defensive lineman out. It matters, and so he doesn't have that. So what it does is, it doesn't mean that he can't play in this league. Doesn't mean that he's disqualified from being a starter. What it means is that his margin for error becomes that much slimmer than the next guy. And he knows that. And he does a nice job of that. But it is a con that I have to address. He plays a little too upright. And at times, can get knocked back by bigger blockers. Doesn't have a ton of mass in the lower half. That's not really where his strength is. He's more in the upper half. So that's something that kind of is evident on film. Needs to be more sound in coverage. This is more nitpicky, but he's still a really quality linebacker in that department. But he can get caught chasing, leaving his assignment, seeing an opportunity, going to seize it, and then ends up being not the best move. His tackling technique needs to be refined, in my opinion, because he tackles too high at times. And again, I think the thing that's really important is the tackles. Just because they worked in college, you can never assume that's going to work in the NFL. You have to assume that the guys that you're about to play against are a lot stronger, they're a lot faster, they just have better technique, and it's harder to tackle a lot of these guys. And this is a con, and obviously it's worth, addressing, but it's not a disqualification in my eyes. He doesn't force a lot of turnovers or a lot of takeaways. While others in the draft, like a Schweschinger, guys like that, they go for the peanut punch. They offer more as a ball hawk. That's not really his game. Now, that doesn't mean he can never be good at that. I think he got better and better and better each year in college, so I'm actually really excited to see when he ends up being in the pros. My money is on him ending up being a really, really high-end starting linebacker, so not really worried about it. But again, worth mentioning, only forced 2 turnovers in his career. So what are the comparisons here? Well, the comparison, I got 2. So normally I would just do a player comp, but I have 2 in this one. First one that came to mind is Bobby Okereke out of Stanford. He's in the league right now, playing for the Giants. I like Okereke a lot. This is a guy that I've always liked and really liked him in college. We interviewed him on Downtown Rams, like a big fan of his. He's very similar in terms of football IQ and just his overall well-rounded ability. Okereke can do everything. Really good tackler, sound tackler, good against the run, can drop into coverage, and actually not just drop into coverage and just play, right? Like he's not just there. He can make an impact. He's a good player, well-rounded linebacker, underrated in that sense. But I think when you look at the testing comparison, that is Deion Jones all the way through. Now understand this, when Deion Jones first was drafted out of LSU, I remember myself and a lot of people looking at him as like he is the new age linebacker. He is a crazy elite athlete, going to be crazy fast, all that. And now that time has gone on, I mean, now we're talking about Chris Paul Jr., who's almost the same identical testing, and we're not talking about the same thing. We're not 4'6" linebacker. Like this is so common nowadays. So, I think really when you look at it, the athleticism, the blitzing, sticking in the hip pocket of a tight end or running back, I think those are a lot of the things that Deion Jones possesses. So I think those are the comparisons. Now, what do I end up seeing him being? I mean, I think he can be a Pro Bowl linebacker, although I know Pro Bowl doesn't really mean anything to people anymore. But let's just say this. I think he could be a top half of the league linebacker, maybe top 10 someday. You're getting a guy that's good at everything already, right off the rip, still young, and still plenty of room to grow, not just as a player, not just mentally, but into his body as well. So I think that's something to keep in mind there. And then, of course, why does he make sense for the Rams? Why would the Rams be interested? Well, I've said this before. I'll say it again. It was in the Omar Speights video, and I'm just going to make it very clear. Chris Paul Jr. is probably the best fit for Omar Speights. First off, understand this. If you have a linebacker that's 6'3", 6'4", 240, 245, 250, you can probably disqualify them from being a Rams linebacker. Based on recent history, Omar Speights, Christian Roseboom, Jake Hummel, Ernest Jones, Elias Neal, Tony Fields, Troy Reeder being the exception at 6'3", Traven Howard and Kenny Young are all under 6'3". In addition to that, everybody I just mentioned is below 240 pounds. The Rams have a type. They like the shorter, they like the stockier, they like the quicker than fast type of guy, and I think Chris Paul Jr. fits that. So why does he make sense with Omar Speights? Very simple. Omar Speights is a guy that can help you in the run game. He's getting better in coverage, but he's really good in the run game. Already one of the better run defenders in the league, in my opinion, based on the film that I just watched. So then you add Chris Paul Jr., who is a better cover guy, and I think he can complement Omar Speights more than, say, a Christian Roseboom, right? So I think that's kind of where I would look, where if the Rams are looking to add another linebacker, that makes the most sense because Nate Landman is pretty much going to be just a run defender, right? He's going to be a run stopper. He got better. Don't get me wrong. He got better, in coverage. I'm not trying to say he didn't because he did, and I pointed out, but I'm just saying that Nate Landman, in my opinion, this is a guy that he's 6 foot. I'm looking it up right now. 6'3", 240. Funny. 6'3", 240. So he's basically, if I'm being honest with you, the Troy Reeder replacement, right? He's going to offer something that Troy Reeder had because don't forget, Troy Reeder was the starter. But Troy Reeder lost his starting job, and I think Nate Landman is going to be that third guy, and I think whoever they draft is going to be that second guy next to Omar Speights. And I think that second guy should probably be Chris Paul Jr. if it works out. Can you get him in the third round? Will you have to move down and get him in the second? I don't know. I think he should go in the second, in my opinion. He's a good enough player to be a second-round pick, probably mid-second to late second, but I could see him falling into the third because he doesn't force a lot of turnovers, has some length issues there, and I could see it, people overlooking this guy. But I'll just say this, when in doubt, Rams like smart, conscientious football players that have good film. They don't care about the 40 time. The testing doesn't really matter a ton. They got the GPS, all that. I think Chris Paul Jr. screams Ram as far as what they look for. Now, will they end up getting him? Obviously, there's 31 other teams vying for different players. That remains to be seen, but I think he makes a lot of sense. He's probably one of my favorite fits. I think the best fit for the Rams, if I'm being entirely honest, is Knight. So, you have Demetrius Knight Jr. I think he's probably the best fit for them and who I think they'll be the most interested in. But will he be there? That's the question. I don't know. But I think Chris Paul Jr. makes a lot of sense for the Rams. I think he offers all the things that you want. And I think Chris Shula could really benefit having a guy like that to be able to blitz. We saw Omar Speights get a chance to blitz and have that success against the Eagles, but what we didn't get to really see is consistent blitzing. We haven't really seen it since Corey Littleton. And then, of course, Ernest Jones comes around. Finally, we start to see it again. And now Ernest Jones is gone. So are they going to use that more with Omar Speights? But they could also, potentially do that with Chris Paul Jr., who had 9.5 sacks. It's worth mentioning. So my take on it, really good football player. Heady, smart, has the athleticism you want. It's not, crazy, but it's really good. And it was crazy. If this guy came out in 2016, people would be all over him. But I think he's falling under the radar because guys are now running in the 4.4s. That's just how I feel. But I think in a lot of ways, this is a guy that just shows the signs. He's getting better. He's smart. He puts a lot, attention to detail. Those are the guys that I bet on. Not necessarily just traits, but guys that seem to get it. Guys that recognize, what's going on. Guys that can really diagnose things. This is a guy that I'm willing to bet ends up being a top flight linebacker. So I think he'd be a great fit with Omar Speights. We'll see what ends up happening. But that is my breakdown on Chris Paul Jr. out of Ole Miss. If you liked what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Be sure to, to subscribe. That's the big thing. But also, if you like this, be sure to check out some of the other videos. I have another bunch of them. We'll continue to do this. But, of course, these are now getting copyright claims, so we'll see how long we can go. I do plan on just biting the bullet and, just putting the clips in there. Not that I'm doing anything wrong. It's totally within, the rights of, anyway, that's neither here nor there. Point being, hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this player, let me know in the comment section below. If you don't, let me know in the comment section below. If you have a different comparison to him, let me know. But that's going to do it. You guys take care. I'll see you soon. Later, folks. All right, guys. So once again, just want to let you guys know that you can check out my new side project, The Lounge. I interview athletes, musicians, actors, actresses, all the nine. So definitely check it out over on The Lounge with Jake Ellenbogen channel. Be sure to subscribe and enjoy. In case you guys haven't noticed, I do have a Discord channel for my community on this channel. And if you want to be a part of it, it is free. The link is in the description below. You can sign up. This is basically a 24/7 Rams channel, and we are almost at 1,100 members. So if you want to be a part of it, just hit the link in the description below.